in there.
We love shooting, hunting, and educating. So if you want to learn about long-range shooting, you're in the right place. This is the Long Range Addicts Podcast. Shooter ready, stand by.
What up, everybody? Great to be back. I've released a bunch of episodes recently. A lot of them I've just kind of been recording as I go down the freeway to talk about with, looking into barrels, looking into ballistics, things like that. So make sure you're following on one of the podcast pages to do that. iHeartRadio, the Podbean, any podcast site that you usually listen to this stuff, you can listen to our stuff. Anyway, of course, I want to thank Primary Arms as our title sponsor. Again, I can't say enough, the sport they've given to us between optics and uppers and everything. And it's kind of become the Midway USA, I guess you could say, of everything that is tactical and shooting. You've got long range scopes, you've got LVPOs, you've got red dots, you've got pistol parts, you've got everything you can think of now. Primary Arms is kind of taking that over. So we appreciate them, of course, for stepping up and sponsoring us. First off, I always want to try and talk about some stuff that I've seen recently or stuff that has been sent to me. I've got a couple things that were sent to me this week. First off, Stealth Project Suppressors sent me some suppressors to do reviews on. I've been getting a lot of suppressors lately, to do reviews on and to check out. And Stealth Projects kind of caught my eye. I've got Silencer Co's, I've got KG Maids or KGM Techs, I've got Stealth Projects. I've got a new nozzler can coming. Suppressors are kind of one of those things that I think everybody should own. And just between your hearing protection and hunting and everything else, they're phenomenal. So keep your eye out for the Stealth Projects review. I've got one of the new Athlon tripods behind me. We're going to do a review on it. Super excited for that because they kind of came out with everything. I mean, the tripod came with the hammock, it came with the carrying case, shoulder strap, it came with everything. And I think they were like $700, and they weren't too bad. But so this is going to be doing it. Rudy just came on. Thanks for sending it to me, man. So I'm going to be doing a review on it pretty quick. No, I don't have any Huxworks cans. More of my cans are rated for long range rifle, and I haven't been that excited about them for long range rifle. They're phenomenal on ARs, but for long range rifle, I'm just not that into it. So I'm excited to do that. I've got a ton more freaking reviews that I've got to do, but those are two that I really wanted to hit on real quick. Next, something that I've seen this week that's kind of been troubling me, and I hate to get into politics, but I keep seeing these rumors of fires of they're like meat packing, food packaging places going up in flames. And I tried looking it up a minute ago, and it's nowhere in mainstream media. But if you find them, you can find them in local stories, like a local story, like this giant food plant has gone up in flames. And from what the rumors that I've heard, there's been about like 12 to 14 of these giant food packaging places go up in flames. So it's kind of got me a little wondering, what the next step is, because, COVID hasn't, gone to their what they wanted it to do. The elections are rigged, everything. So what is the next way to kind of control the narrative of the way the United States is going? So it's kind of got me a little worried about that kind of stuff and what the media won't say and what they will say, with Elon buying Twitter. Hopefully that really opens the doors to us in the freaking firearms industry as well, because we're so limited with everything they can do. I know I just set up a Truth Social account today for me and a couple of my clients to see how it works. I want to see everything kind of evolve. We've had the microphone turned off for us too long, so I'm a little bit worried about how that's going to go. And hopefully, we can go into the next era, into the rest of the year, and actually be able to show products to people and talk about stuff online without being hidden and censored. But anyway, we'll see. But for all of you joining us tonight, I appreciate it. I've got the man, the myth, legend, Shannon Kay on here. Me and Shannon have known each other for a while, and If you don't know Shannon, I'm going to let him introduce himself. And we kind of want to deep dive into this. If you guys have questions, don't be afraid to ask. If there's something that's a little stingy, ask it. Because, Shannon's not trying to hide anything. The PRS isn't trying to hide anything as much as you like to, I believe, hear that online. I don't know. We'll let Shannon answer it. He's here, he's live, and, he can't hide behind it. So we're going to let him do that. But introduce yourself, Shannon.
Yeah, guys. So Shannon Kay, I've been the PRS director for, well, you know what? I don't want to take that credit. There's the PRS director, but there's a lot of good, my wife being the main one, and people that know the PRS, they know Jewel is the horsepower behind the engine as far as doing all the day-to-day work. And then obviously our staff, Chrissy, Travis, and we're bringing one more on here pretty soon. But we run the PRS, we manage the PRS, we lead the PRS, and then also like primarily, also run K&N. That actually is the majority of my job. We have a training facility in Tennessee. It is, my opinion, of course, top in the country, multiple government, international contracts, and probably train. I'm pretty sure we train more civilians than any other agency. So non-government agency, I should say. Primarily focus for civilians in long range. Obviously, all three disciplines: pistol, carbine training, pistol, carbine, long range for our military clients. But really, I'm here to chat with Cole and talk to Cole. Worked a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and really here to answer your questions and encourage guys. Hey, challenge us. I think you're going to find guys that have preconceived notions. Maybe you're upset about some things. Cool, address it. But really, it's not for me to address. You're going to find that our structure I had very little to do with the decision making. In fact, I don't even have a vote on the decision making, or don't take a vote on it. So, all things PRS related or shooting related, long range competition, where the sport's going, where the industry is going as it relates to competition. Open ears, open answers. We'll have an honest discussion, and nothing's off table. So look forward to it, Cole.
Yeah, and I've had this discussion with a lot of people. I had it with Travis when he started the NRL. It's one of those things that if somebody walks into this, you're not walking into it because you're going to make a lot of money, because you're not. Everybody knows that. It's not a money-making thing. It's more of a promoting the passion. Yes, as you owning the PRS, you get money, but for how much of that money actually goes in your pocket between matches, website design and data, paying people to run stuff, all the other stuff. And I kind of want people to take that preconceived notion out of it. And, Travis found that out. It is super hard to run these things. You've got, you got so many matches to try and babysit and everything else. And, God bless her, Julie, your wife, is phenomenal at that kind of stuff. She's always reaching out, always sending me emails. I suck at responding to them, but you've got a great band behind you. But I think I kind of want to go back to the roots of the PRS. The PRS started with when I started shooting, Sean, and who else was there? Sean, and there was the board that was kind of there.
Yeah, so it actually goes deeper than that. So Rich Emmons started it. There's a couple matches. I mean, the guys that have been around forever. Let me just stop. It kind of goes back to the problem, right? Is people are generally short-lived in the industry, right? Of course, you're not. Your average shooter and your average match director, numbers guy, right? I am facts. I try to remove emotion from it. Your average shooter and your average match director, talking 2-day national, and in fact, in most cases, 1-day regional as well, have about a 3 to 4 year shelf life before they burn out, right? So, when I hear like, all these match directors are crushing it, I kind of chuckle. And then when the matches go away, all the shooters are like, well, what happened? Well, guys, it just doesn't make sense for them. Like whether it's time, whether it's financial, it absolutely doesn't make sense. But you know what? If some of the biggest detractors. I'll be like, hey, go run a match. If we have an opening, here's the pathway. They're like, well, that's too hard. Well, that's what the guy you're complaining about, that's the challenge he has and the risk that he assumes. So, given that, I mean, at the finale this past year in New Mexico, I was like, hey, how many guys have been in this sport industry, whatever, longer than 4 years? How many master directors are here? There was very few of us, George Gardner, myself, very few of us, the guys that like myself that were at the top, and of course Wade Steubenville still around, that were around that first year or two. Those guys aren't there. They're even the top guys. Everyone focuses on the top guys now. To stay at the top, it takes a tremendous amount of training, of dedication, and they have a year or two peak, and then reality, or not reality, but real life, family, work, kids get in the way. And so, as I'm probably the first director, other than Rich, that kind of, I guess really didn't make him about himself. I always tried to like, hey, match directors, sponsors, shooters, and you can see that from our social media efforts. And that's really why we've had a tremendous amount of success the past 3 years. And so, that has helped a bunch, but a lot of people see it differently. You were talking about, Travis and the NRL and when we came on after about a year, I kind of predicted this past year, like this was, we kind of saw that coming, and it is because both the NRL's model at the time and ours, the PRS, was incredibly flawed. We were operating off, hey, if you want to be a member, go ahead and be a member. But if you don't, it's okay too, right? We took what we thought was a bold step, right? And like, hey, we're going to charge, or if you're running a match, you're going to pay $3 a head, right? And I did this huge presentation, like, hey, here are the other action or shooting sports, popular shooting sports out there that are nonprofit, right? They're not made a profit. Yep, guys get into salary. People that run it and do the admin and all the work behind it need to be paid. And I'm like, guys, we are just going to mirror these nonprofits, but many of those nonprofits require membership. So, given that outlook, looking at a 5-10 year plan, I'm like, hey, in long range precision rifle, we set up a structure that was flawed. Now most shooters don't care. Once you give somebody, some sort of benefit or a standard, you change that, and it's like, taking away Social Security, right? You can't do that. And so it was the writing was on the wall for both us and the NRL, as far as like, hey, does the structure have the stability and the sustainability to maintain itself? And it didn't. So I was like, hey guys, we're going to do this. If we lose one of our 100 clubs or some match directors, my determination was that's okay, because then we're not going to be around to organize a sport. So if we want to go back to what we were in the past, where it's, outlaw, then fine. But I'm not going to waste, I'm not going to destroy my family. I'm not going to, work, my wife in the ground to do that. And 98%, I would say, was like, yep, that's okay. Because we took 2 years from when we took it over to kind of show like, hey, guys, this is the direction we're going. This is what we're going to do. And there was a lot of good faith on those match directors, especially the sponsors as well. And most of the shooters, because we were so responsive. And it worked. And so it is, do I consider us still in our infancy? No. Do I think we're still toddlers, sub-adults? Yeah. I mean, that would be in my assessment where we're at in the sport. Things are starting to solidify. People are finding, different organizations like the NRL is finding their niche. We have our niche, so you can consider us united. Do I think there's a false, because of the ill will, things said, history, whatever, especially in the East and Central and West? Yeah. And I'll let the shooters figure that out. That, you know what, guys, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, and our structure's very, very sound. Guys that want to jump on board, awesome, we're doing that. And so it's, you know, my assessment to our sponsors and shooters and members is like, hey, we're really strong and we're growing. The arrows continue to point up since we started. I used to get a lot of questions, Cole, like, hey, how about COVID? Yeah, that was a little worrisome for 3 to 4 months, in 2019, 20. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, like ammunition. Like, yeah, that I'm more worried about like components and ammunition, more so than I was ever worried about COVID. We still see that today. We see that in our regional 1 day numbers. Our 2 day numbers this year so far are off the charts, and so we're happy. But we really like to see, the availability of components to normalize, and I still think we're a long way off in that. Talking to those guys throughout the industry.
Yeah, I've had plenty of meetings with some of those guys, and they're all struggling like everybody else. I'm trying to buy steel for different things, and it's just, no matter what industry you're in, it's what it is. But now that I believe this discipline has grown so much over the last few years, everybody wants primers, everybody wants powder, everybody wants, everything to reloading components. So it's made it super, super hard. And those companies, coming from Remington, my background, Remington Barnes, they couldn't just add stuff because, you've got to have, number one, people to run it. You've got to invest in the machinery. Can you get the machinery? There's a whole nother podcast that we could talk about that. But one of the big things that I want to kind of hit on right here is, let's take 3Gun and some of these others. They put an unbelievable amount of money into TV episodes and all this stuff to really promote 3Gun, and then it kind of tanked. Was that the people behind it? Was that people just not giving a shit about it? I don't know. It could be a little bit of both, but where is Shannon and the PRS's idea on the growth of this? Because me coming from owning Long Range Tactics and the podcast and everything's just exploding in long range game. But when it comes to competing, where is the growth in the sport going to come?
So I think that's a huge question. So we could go down a bunch of different rabbit holes there. But so, it's not lost on me watching 3Gun just 3-4 years, maybe 5 years ahead of us, seeing that implosion. And I don't know all the facts, whether it's hearsay or whatever. I see some of that management. I am super, super cautious on, hey, you know what? I'd love to do TV. We work with the ScoutNet, Shooting USA consistently. We use Tactaholics, but we are super cautious with what we call the members' money. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That membership, those that choose, right? I'm very super sensitive to that. If I run it that way, then our long range stability is going to be fine. And unfortunately, you look at two different things, right? I look at golf. I am a casual golfer. I only golf with my family. I'm terrible. I'm absolutely terrible. But fuck, man, that's a huge thing for TV. If you're not into golf, I don't know how it has its own channel. Because to any long range shooter, we're like, dude, we should have our own channel, right? Because this is awesome. Of course, we're much smaller in golf. There's golf courses and all across the country, all across the globe. But it's similar. So I've never been a huge believer in, and I think this is where the NRL struggled in, hey, people are going to watch, shooting. We're still too much of a niche. We are, what percentage of America's gun owners? You're probably smarter on that than I am, Cole, right? Small percentage, right?
Yeah, I mean it's bigger than it's ever been, but it's still like a minute, like very small percentage.
And so when you take the long range community and then you carve off the long range community that competes, that is a niche market, right? And there's a lot of people excelling. We have a ton of businesses. We have 55 different sponsors that support us to facilitate the PRS to grow the sport, because they know if they grow the sport, then their business is going to grow anywhere from a few $1,000s to tens of $1,000s. Really, so it's really, 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 really small. We took that approach like, hey, who are our people, right? They're typically not the big companies that have bigger marketing budgets. The PRS has since we took over, a renewal rate of about 99% every year after year, year after year. And the reason why we do it is we charge probably below market rate. And we tell them, like, we tell them the truth, like, hey, this is what we're going to do for you. Here's our reach. Here's what we could do. And this is just funding the organization, essentially, because we have a flaw model, and we don't require membership for everyone that shoots, which, shooting, USA Shooting, our Olympic sports, any of our other action sports, NRA, they all require membership. So we don't do that. So, we're about 60-40 percentage, 60 to sponsorship, 40 to membership. So to me, as a director, I consider that a flaw model. And it's tough, but politically, environmentally, whatever you want to call, it is incredibly difficult to change that. We have a very loose affiliation with our match directors. We want to maintain the match director independence. As a match director hosting two of the biggest matches in the PRS, I want a level of independence as a match director. As a PRS director, hey, I'm okay with that, man. Let him do it. Let's have these rules that the shooters and the match directors, regionally focused and then obviously nationally focused, construct. And that model threatens a lot of folks. They just don't like it, right? Because we do have 55 sponsors or more in the industry. They're like, hey, we want to help you a little bit. This is important to us. We see a tremendous amount of value in that. And then there's the shooters that are like, hey, I want more places to shoot. Yeah, I'll pay you 25, 40, $100 for a Pro Series membership. I'll support this cause because this is important to me. So, most shooters, I'd say, Cole, they don't understand it. They just want to go shoot and have a good time. But and I don't want to sound like some union boss, right? Because I'm a pretty conservative guy. Like, I'm not a union guy, right? But those guys benefit heavily from the guys that pay their dues, because we're deconflicting matches. We're growing. We're giving match directors that may lease land or buy a bunch of steel or invest in props the opportunity to, like, hey, man, let's put PRS behind it. And yeah, we're going to give you some shooters will come. Now, the PRS can only do so much. Ultimately, it's on that match director, and that match director absolutely deserves the credit to, growing the sport, and it works. So really, we've taken the approach, for the past 3-4 years, hey, man, let's provide opportunity and let's just get out of the way. Like most of us would appreciate our government doing. Hey, provide opportunity, set the conditions, and get the hell out of the way. And we've done that, and we've seen a tremendous amount of growth.
Right. Yeah. As a match director, I ran matches for quite a few years, and it was super easy for me in the beginning because there wasn't so many matches to pull from sponsors. Like my sponsor table, they're like, dude, your sponsor table is better than most national matches. But, as more and more matches came, it became harder and harder and harder as a match director to put that up. And as a match director, I wasn't perfect. I screwed up. I did different things. And it was just amazing how many people got so pissed off at you because something got screwed up or something didn't happen. It's like, you guys got to realize, like, we didn't intend for this to happen, and it happened, but it was how we dealt with the issue or the problem after it happened. And, that's one of those things that I've heard recently is somebody bitches about something a match director did, and as a match director, we've got to take some sort of the liability for what we did and how we planned it. But it goes back, and then they go, well, the PRS, this is what I've heard recently. The PRS isn't, doing this, or this. And it's like, they don't realize in the NRL and the PRS, there's pretty much a board, right? And they come up with the rules, they come up with the policies, they vote on it, and they're the ones that put out that stuff. So, if you want to be mad, yeah, you've got to be mad at the match director, but also as the PRS, how does maybe the PRS deconflict that, better? Is it maybe having just someone from the PRS there that, doesn't shoot at all? They're just pretty much a babysitter and are a deconflictor. Is that necessary? I don't know. But it seems like, and there's a lot of people out there that still create a lot of issues. There's a lot of shit that goes on. We all know it. But how do we keep the growth going in the right direction instead of the people coming out of there? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the growth is there. So, the reality of the sport is, and of course it depends what level you're talking about. You're talking 22, you're talking 1 day regional series, you're talking, 2 day. There's a little different. Yeah, there's crossover and cross pollination. There's no doubt. The best thing is really our structure is phenomenal. There might be distractors out there like, oh, the PRS, Shannon Kay, Julie, whoever. And really it's a false narrative in the sense. It's like, hey, guys, all we do is the work and we lead it and facilitate it. But the rules come from a structure of regional directors, regional match directors, and then obviously those regions 2 day match directors. So we do our best to, the big 2 day, the mainstay, the pro series, the national matches, is about 40 or so across the country. That they form the board, they dictate the rules, but we also take those rules and be like, hey, rimfire, we really like to be nested because the PRS, the more it's nested, the more easy it is. We changed the rule today, Cole. It takes the community about a year to understand it and really kind of disseminate, given that the average shooter shoots 3 to 5 matches every year, depending on what discipline it is. So that's why we're really hesitant to change rules. Like, guys, don't let somebody that's out there squawking from the top of the hill that has no vested interest in our community affect what we're doing, because most of it is emotion. There's obviously, you can look at different websites, you can look at different things. Hey, they actually have the same model as we do. They have a free or very limited membership, but they're dependent on sponsorships. That threatens some people. Okay, well, fine. You know what? To me, hey, it's America. You can compete. You also can compete very healthy and work with an industry. We have a ton of we have 40 match directors in a regional, and we have about 40 match national level, and about 100 on the rimfire and the regional level for centerfire. And we are constantly kind of taking down the temperature. Hey, guys, we will all grow. A rising tide will raise all boats. Work together, because what your buddy does that you might be threatened by, a new match in a certain state, let's say, right? Oh, he's going to take all my shooters and I'm going to have a less draw. We're very, very cautious on growth, on making it sustainable. That's what a lot of the shooters don't understand. Like, hey, what happened to the NRL? What was wrong with it? Nothing was wrong with it, other than, from my perspective, it was dividing the sport. It was a copy. It was a breakaway from the PRS is doing. Okay, they didn't like the PRS. That's before my time. That's fine. But one or the other was doomed to fail because there wasn't enough to go around, right? And so what we do is we try to manage growth very cautiously, make sure guys are committed. We put them in a pipeline. Hey, run a couple 1-day matches, build your base, and we can get you to a national level match. So there's a lot of things that people don't even see organizationally. They just go to a match and they shoot, but they don't understand if the match director has 60 guys at a 2-day national level match, that is unsustainable. And that is because they actually lose money. They definitely don't pay anything for their time. The sponsors don't react to it, so they won't provide support for it. And that's essentially what happened in the NRL. That the shooters didn't respond, the numbers suffered, um, and um, and especially out west, there's a little bit. We're kind of in a little bit of a haze of fog right now. Guys are like, oh man, there's not the NRL right now. Okay, we took a very cautious approach because at this point, now that the NRL is not there, our primary focus wasn't unification, and now it turned to unification to competitive parity. I want the matches out west to be as competitive as the matches in the central region, the Great Lakes, East Coast, Northeast, Southeast. And so we're taking a very slow approach because we want the match directors that have the best facilities, high numbers, where you get a very competitive field at that pro level, at that 2-day level, and it's working very good. I expect to grow out west, but we're going to do it very, very cautiously. I'm looking at numbers. What is California doing? What is Washington doing? What is Idaho doing? Where in the Southeast, we're like, hey, we're good to go. Hey, East Coast, we're good. Atlantic, we're good to go. Great Lakes, we're good to go. Central, we're good to go. Matches are filling, and match directors are getting better and better and better. And so a big match was 80, 90 guys. Now we're 120, 150 on average. Of course, there's a few facilities out there that can handle the large numbers. Some of them are out west. Hornady, I was talking to George the other day. They're probably looking at 150 shooters. K&M, my place, we're at 270 probably right now. The grind's always 300. Those are outliers. But I look at those numbers and we study them. A lot of guys get upset at that. Hey, how come you can't give me numbers? On the two-day level, we need full matches at the best facilities. We get good competitive parity, which is in our mission statement. And then we get the sustainability that the match directors will be able to put on that venue year after year after year.
Yeah. And I mean, coming as a match director, I understand it. There was definitely some match directors that really took the time to go out there and, number one, talk about their sponsors. That's always a big thing. As a sponsor myself, it is super hard for me to try and support a match that the match director doesn't go out there and support his match, whether it be finding somebody to run their social media so they can push it or something like that. But a lot of that goes from the match director, but it also goes back to, who you choose as a match director and, kind of the following that person has themselves, because if nobody knows who they are, it's definitely going to be harder to sell that match too. So that's definitely one of those political issues that I'm sure you guys have to deal with a lot, right?
No, it is. And, to me, I think most match directors would be upset at me in the counsel that I give to sponsors or new sponsors coming in and want to be tied with the PRS. With 800 matches a year, essentially. That's what we had last year across Rimfire, 1-day and 2-day matches. A lot of the new guys come in, they're like, oh my gosh, we're PRS affiliate now. My email is blown up with everyone is running a PRS match. And I actually counsel them. I'm like, hey guys, you guys need to make a good, never say no, but saying no doesn't need to cost you money. The shooters don't like it. We are on a path for prize table unsustainability. We're probably already on it. And people need to understand that there's so much, these companies are making so much money, they should give stuff away for free. Okay, to who and why? To give to the top 10, 20 guys that like these high dollar items. So we really we're very honest with the sponsors. They appreciate it. I know if I polled every match director and say, hey, if you didn't have to do a prize table, would you reduce your costs? And every single one of them would be like, absolutely yes. Right. So it's kind of it'd be interesting to see how this goes. I know for us at K&M, we were the 2 largest matches in the country. The hardest part for us, we have our systems down pat. I own my own facility. It's designed to maximize the capabilities. But if we didn't have to do the prize table, yeah, our cost would reduce tremendously because the amount of labor, the amount of promotion. I mean, Julie is absolutely dedicated to that. And you see that all over social media. And this is what those sponsors should expect because they're giving away, free money, essentially, free product, essentially, and they want some sort of return. So I don't fault our industry for getting tight. I actually counsel them in the name of sustainability. I counsel them like, hey, if it's a 1 day rimfire match or a 1 day regional match, that's probably not a good ROI. It's probably not a good rate of return. Um, so, and maybe some masters should be upset, but it really should be these rimfire finales regionally. Should be the 1 day regional finales. It should be the 2 day matches where the sponsors could really get comfortable with that. So we don't own that, but we have a tremendous amount of influence. And so, that's a whole separate call. That's a whole podcast. That's a whole session on its own right there. So people need to shoot because they love to shoot. But that's our industry. That's how it works. Obviously it's thriving. But there is a point every single year. It's like, Shannon, hey man, I've given away $100,000 in free gear every year. What should I do? I'm like, hey, you got two different models. You got actually three different models. And sometimes best practice would be a combination of all three. Hey, have a shooting team, have a face to your brand, that's getting out there. Hey, donate to the prize tables. Hey, support the PRS financially and product for the finale. And we kind of coach them on that. And it usually takes guys a couple of years to figure out what is the best, kind of rate of return on what they're doing. And that's why it ebbs and flows. I really think the shooters, need to understand that. And I think most do. But there's still a little bit of, and no sponsor wants to say no. The best thing we could do is do what we're doing is keep supporting the sponsors. They're growing, we're growing. So right now everything's good. But what happens when we plateau? That's my question. What happens when we plateau? Because right now everyone's up, industry's up, ammo's up, matches are up, PRS is up, everyone's growing like a weed with fertilizer on it. But what happens when we don't and we plateau? Because we'll get there eventually.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do everything that we can to not, but then things are going to start to differ. So people are shooting matches because of their prize table. I see that. I think they're a little misguided. They should really look at the match director and look at their facility, their props, their organization, their efforts, and it will be a healthier at the end of the day. And that's also, going back to three guns. That's why they struggled. They were charging tremendous amounts of sponsors. Maybe a little bit of mismanagement. I don't know for certain, but that's my assessment. Very broad, not concrete whatsoever. And it kind of blew up. We are not structuring the PRS on that model at all. We are structuring on the model of like, hey, we're supporting the match directors, we're supporting the shooters. Let's grow the sport. The sponsorship is secondary to all that, obviously.
Right. And people don't believe me. Like, I literally had to hire a assistant to deal with I had to hire an assistant anyway, but she is here to pretty much handle a lot of the requests that I get because I run so many company sponsorship stuff. And it is impossible to keep up on them because there are so many little outlaw things coming out now. Little 1 day matches everywhere that want sponsorships and stuff. And it's just like, as me as a sponsor, I can't tell my companies to go, look, you need to sponsor all these. You need to spend $100,000 because, like, I can do that on an online ad or something somewhere and see what the return on investment is as a sponsor, but you can't see that. And the other problem is, I've had this discussion with a few other people, is it's like, it's amazing now how many people don't thank sponsors when they pull something off prize table, stuff like that. And when sponsors aren't seeing their stuff even get mentioned about, then they get butthurt about it, and that's kind of to the effect of it almost takes a national entity to really push that sponsorship or those ads because a lot of the shooters aren't doing it that they should be, and some of the match directors aren't doing it like they should be, right? So it's like
That's so
that's
cool
super hard.
and we tell these guys, and once they kind of get into that sponsorship, they kind of realize like, hey, um, I don't like it going to the top guys all the time, or whatever. I'm seeing it for sale on a website or wherever, and I'm like, guys, you guys control that, right? Now, the sponsorship, like people think like these companies have a person, and some do, but their marketing departments are very broad. They're, magazines, internet, print, whatever it is. These masters are just a part of that. And I'm like, guys, you feel very free to put limitations on what you're doing, right? Like Night Force leverages the PRS very, very well. They say, hey, we want to sponsor the tiebreaker every single stage. We have a certain budget, so certain matches that we choose, and we just give them the roster with the numbers of their attendance, and we tell them like, hey, this is what we want, and we want a picture highlighted from the PRS every time. So we go back to the match directors. Hey guys, if you want the PRS skill stage tiebreaker, you're either going to get a discount off a scope, or maybe these 10 matches of a free scope. If you agree to this, this is what we're going to give you. The majority of match directors say, yep, absolutely. And then we go back to them and be, okay, you will send a picture of that. And so Night Force leverages that very, very well. It's a very good for them. And other guys will be like, nope, this is what I want. I wanted to go to a new shooter. I wanted to go to the last place shooter or last place in this division, because they want to really, most of that sponsorship is to like, hey, I want to get it into the hands of the shooter that is going to influence other shooters, right? So you take a PRS shooter, mid-pack, new shooter, he's at a local club or whatever, he gets a free product. He goes back to that club and like, hey guys, I got this free Vortex or whatever it may be, right? Oh, this is a really nice scope. And then so what happens? His buddy says, okay, I got to have that. I got to upgrade this or that. And so that works. So that is their primary strategy, to take a product, to sell it, to, like you said, not thank a sponsor, not recognize them in some capacity, to kind of repay that sponsor for basically giving the money away for free. Because really, shooters need to understand they are paying the match director to provide a service. And that service is conducting the match and covering their costs and hopefully covering their time putting into it. The sponsorship is it's tied to it, but it's a separate entity. And so, like I said, it's a whole separate podcast, but I do think, some guys will complain like, oh, well, this price table is really good, this table is really bad. Well, there's a lot of variables in there that matter. Yeah, maybe it's the effort of the match director. But the match director's primary purpose is to follow rules, to run a fair and execute a very challenging match in accordance with the rules. Secondary to that is to a prize table. So I think most guys that have been around, like yourself and they understand that. But some of the newer guys are like, hey, I'm going to the match. I at least want to get something that covers my match fee. And that might be great, but that's, kind of the wrong way of looking at it at the end of the day.
But I've had that discussion with a multitude of people that come on this podcast. It says, think about it. By the time you spend gas money, a hotel room, ammo, all of the stuff that you've done, I mean, really put this in your head. You could have bought probably what you got off the prize table as a mid-pack shooter, not as a top level shooter, because they've put in that much work. Yeah. But as a mid-pack, middle level shooter, you probably could have gone and bought that. But then guys bitch and complain that, well, I didn't get, a prize, or I didn't get this. Well, it's like, if we took the price of the match down so that you weren't paying as much, are you doing it because it's a passion, or are you doing it because you think you deserve something? And that's one of the big questions. Is it's like, and I say this time and time again, why do you shoot? Is it because you want to shoot, or because you want to get something off prize table and show your buddies? Now, we did a scale at Remington, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. Shit, it was too long ago. But for every product a person buys, it affects the purchase of a minimum of 4 people around them.
Yeah.
So one person buys an optic, it can affect 4 other buddies or 4 people that watch them on social, and it has a huge effect because now each one of those 4 people have 4 people that do it to them. So as a shooter, you buy something and you promote the shit out of you getting it, that affects more sales for everybody. And that's the hard part that shooters don't really get is you are then a sales project, because I guarantee if Armageddon Gear or somebody put a product on a table, you pick it up and you promote the shit out of that product, they're going to probably give you a screaming deal, if not send you a product or something else, in the mail, because you did such a good job helping with them with that product.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Cole. The problem is, and it's in our structure as well, and in our council too. Some of these, some of our sponsors is like, hey, guys, make sure you're getting the right matches, because as soon as you get tied to the PRS, bam, there's 150 to 200 match directors that are going to leverage it. Now, we don't control that. Everyone's independent. We do not try to control it. But at the same time, we tell them like, hey, be smart about what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? And so, there's a lot of guys that will, like, yeah, man, they'll try to say yes to everybody. And the problem is they're not getting a return on it. And then they get overwhelmed and they're like, oh my gosh, I gave it $120,000 in product. Am I making that kind of sales? And once they commit to it, they're tied. And so it's really hard on them. And so if it was me and I had a magic wand, which I would never do because everyone's independent. Guys, if you're running a one-day run fire match, if you're running a one-day regional match, you should not be doing sponsorship. That is a PRS director's thoughts on it. It is not policy. It's not in the rules. If you're running a 2-day national match where there's 40 across the country, yes, I think that the way that our culture is now and the rate of return to sponsors, it's healthy to have a prize table for them. It grows the sport at the highest levels. It gets products out there. The sponsors come a lot. They're rubbing elbows with the shooters, making connections, networking, which is part of our mission statement too. And it works very well. But when you're having a total of 750 to 800 matches, that is unsustainable for even if the sponsors say, okay, fine, hey man, here's 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% off certificate, because no one has product right now, obviously with the supply constraints. That is still taxing. That is still somebody that has to process that discount, and it's usually not online, right? It's usually a person in the marketing department that has to process that, and that costs a lot of money. There's a minimum labor to that. The shooters, I think, by and large, don't understand that. I don't think the match directors understand that. In the Southeast and Central region, Great Lakes region, I mean, there's regional matches with 100+ people, and they don't go to sponsorship. And I think that is very sound and sustainable. But they do in the 2-day. I think that's going to take some time to flush out. But my fear is that we will burn out certain sponsors to find that equilibrium to what makes sense. That's why we step in as a PRS not with policy, but with counsel to a lot of the guys. And of course, we're super sensitive because I run 2 matches, the biggest in the country, like I said, and then regional matches. And a lot of guys are like, hey, what matches should I sponsor? Hey, I don't know. Here's the 40. Here's the numbers. Here's the qualifiers. You choose. And the reason why we're asking you to choose to go talk to other people, go talk to shooters, is because we're tight too. So we're very sensitive, knowing that we're running the PRS and we're running we're competing against other national level matches as well.
Right. And I can say that I've seen it out there on the interwebs and different things. And I've even said it. People are like, oh, the PRS is hiding, stuff from some of the matches and not the others. But I'm like, I've been given the chance in a lot of situations to decide what matches that I wanted to sponsor. And the problem is me deciding that, I guess, looks negatively on the PRS itself, because I decided as a sponsor what matches to do, and then those match directors get offended, and then they go out on their soapbox, and tell people. But it comes full circle. It's like as much work as you put into it. We all learned that in the military. You were in the military.
Yeah.
You always get told that you get as much out of it as you put into it. 100%. So
Right.
if you want all these sponsors, if you want a George Gardner, Brian Sykes, Hornady prize table, you better put in the freaking work for it. You know what I mean? If you want a K&M prize table, I've seen the prize tables. They're freaking phenomenal.
Yeah.
You've got to put in the work for that, and the sponsors get return on that. So
Yeah.
I'm talking to those match directors out there that are bitching, complaining, and I'm not trying to toot Shannon's horn here at all, but you've got to also understand that he has to maintain the PRS. So by maintaining the PRS, that means kissing a sponsor's ass. I hate to say it that way, but it is. It's making them happy so that they will come back and sustain the PRS and the sport. So there is.
Yeah. I mean, in a context, yeah, it's super sensitive, right? In another context, like this year, we decided, hey, let's look at COVID, look at supply chains, let's look at reality. Okay, the NRL is gone, and I'll be honest, if the NRL didn't get prize table, which is probably one of the worst decisions that they could have done, right? We probably wouldn't have done it, right? Because when I took over, the PRS was in rough straits. And I'm like, guys, this is unhealthy. This is a match director responsibility, not an organizational responsibility, because the organization can't control, or should it, given the structure, what the match directors do for the sponsors that support their matches, right? So that is super bad. I'm like, okay, fine. We'll do a little bit of prize table. Fortunately for us, with COVID and the NRL going away, we're like, okay, guys, we are backing away from this. We will only accept, because a lot of the sponsors at this point are like, hey, we are not set up to get inundated with all these requests. So I want to give the PRS our sponsorship and dictate it off what they want, and then we will distribute it for them. And it's a once a year type thing. And then every request they get, they basically tell them like, hey, we've given $80,000 worth of product to the PRS and at these matches to whatever level they do. And so they could say it, which is really not saying no. Because I mean, what match directors are getting upset if someone said, hey, I'm giving $80,000 of free shit away, right? And if they do, then that match director is probably not going to last very long, right? Or he's got to do a better job competing for that sponsor's attention, right? And so we said, hey, we're not shipping any product because we are not a shipping company. It was very taxing on us. We got very taxing on the NRL. We got a lot of feedback. I don't know if it's true that caused some scar tissue from sponsors. Like, hey, we don't want to be in this business. We want to be in the promotion, the rules, the keeping score, the growth. Nowhere in that is sponsorship. Yes, one of those is connecting, networking sponsors. So what we did this year was like, hey, here is our sponsor list, not just K&M's, but the PRS. Here is everyone we know. Here is the guy or gal to contact. PRS match directors, here you go. Sponsors, here are our major matches. Here you go. You guys network, because that is the connection. George and Brian, your example, right? They do a phenomenal job of hyping those guys up. You can look all over the PRS social media and you see what Christy and Jewel do for every sponsor. Like, it is like, hey, dude, if you gave a widget that cost $10, you are getting highlighted, right? And so the sponsors appreciate that. That's a lot of work for the new match to kind of get his head wrapped around. Design, of course, fire, set. You still there, Cole? Yeah, we broke up a little bit there. You good?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay,
you. Yeah,
good.
you broke up for a second.
So, I think that's all going to find its equilibrium. The PRS is very sensitive and cautious of what we'll own and then what we'll facilitate. And right now, we're facilitating a ton of it. Let the guys go out, compete in a healthy. I mean, George is one of the best good buddy. And I know there's guys like, oh, well, K&M is, only benefits because, Shannon runs the PRS. Well, okay, only been running the PRS for 3 years now. What about before for the past 7 years that we've been running the match and no connection whatsoever? And we still had prize table. And that's because of the work that we do. So, and that's a lot of work. And I don't think the shooters understand, even at K&M, I look at our structure, our military contracts, our civilian training, and I'm like, my gosh, I'm like, Jewel, we spend, 70% or so of our time, prepping, doing all this stuff. It would be better off to me and us as a business to just run one training event with 20 dudes coming through here than running a match. And I think that PRS or the shooting, the competition community doesn't understand that. And then when a match goes away, they're like, I don't know what happened. It's just expectation management a little bit. People make decisions what's best for them. In a lot of cases, most of these match directors are doing it because they love it, because the joy, because they want to, be part of something bigger than themselves. So I was, I figured this year with inflation and the cost of everything, food, everything's going up. I'm like, man, some of these match directors are go up and the shooters are going to freak out. But I'm like, you know what? It is what it is, because if they don't like it, don't attend. Some guys get their land for free. Some guys, they lease land. If guys want to support the sport, let the market decide. If they're too expensive, then don't shoot. If it's not a good match, then don't shoot it. And in time, year or two, whatever, it'll be replaced. Let the competitive, and we're all capitalists, we're all conservative. Like, let the market decide. That's who we are at our core, right? So it's tough, but God, we got a ton of good shooters, good people. We have match directors that commit more than the shooters will ever understand. And it's working and it's thriving. And sure, there's 10% out there that nothing's going to be happy for them. Okay, fine, man. They typically don't last long in the community.
Right. And when I started doing matches, like I never came into it looking for money. I tried to put as much of it back into nice shirts, food, after parties, everything that I could do to really make it grow. And a lot of it came back to bite me in the ass. I overthought some stuff, some shit got thrown back in my face. It happened. But I mean, let's kind of move on from this, because we've kind of beat the whole prize table to death. And I want to make sure that we hit some of your other points that we wanted to talk about. Now, the PRS Rimfire series has blown up. Rimfire, since when I started at Voodoo, it has gone through the roof. I left Voodoo a couple years ago and it's done nothing but explode. Everybody is selling high-end rifles for 22s. It's funny. Like I got a lot of phone calls when I was at Voodoo. Hey, I'm selling my 6.5 Creed. I want to shoot rimfire. I want to do this. Rimfire has exploded. Where is the projection and where is the PRS stance on the rimfire series and the growth of it?
Yeah, so you broke up a little there, but so in our first year, so we launched back COVID, had an extended season, so 14, 16 months, and I tried heavily, to try to leverage. I'm like, hey man, like, the NRL has. And I'm like, hey man, I'm just coming in, and so I didn't want to, I kind of wanted to work together and try to heal, and it didn't work despite I think everyone's best efforts. So I was really hesitant to do it until the request of all of our PRS matchers, mainly our one-day regional directors, like, hey, we really want to do this. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right, guys, form a committee. Who are the guys? If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And it better be different than what the NRL is doing. Like, what is that sport, right? We get precision, right? Everyone, there's a lot of cross-pollination. And so we didn't we did it. I tried I'm like, hey guys, this is what we're going to do. Is there any kind of compromise we could work out? Okay. We didn't hear a lot back. So, we launched it. We formed a committee, national shooters, national rimfire directors. And so we basically, but my thing was like, hey guys, if it's going to be part of the PRS, I definitely want the rules nested as much as it makes sense, right? And so I want the rules the same as possible. If we can't get that, I don't know if we want it, because it's really hard for these people to understand the rules, at the end of the day. And so we started it, what was it? In October-ish, and we carried the season on. And I'm like, hey guys, let the match directors, with direct feedback from the shooters, tell them what they want. Hey, we don't want ladders and shenanigans just at 100 yards and in, which I understand, because a lot of ranges, there's a lot of smart things that I think that the NRL 22 did, as far as dictating to maybe match directors that aren't truly match directors. But I think the PRS match directors like, no, we want control. We want to dictate the course of fire. I'm like, okay, all right, guys, fine. A couple of outreaches to NRL, no hear back, fine. I mean, Cole, me and you talked to my, hey, man, I am always open, not necessarily on rimfire, but it was on other topics. And like, hey, can we, I'm a huge, like, hey, it's not about us. It's not about money. It's about the sport, right? And sustainability. I don't want to be Three Gun Nation, right? NRL essentially is a caution. Centerfire is essentially cautionary tale now. Like, hey, not their 100 series, because I think that's separate, and I hope they do well with it, right? We launched it, and within a year we became bigger than the NRL, right? I'm a numbers guy. What are their numbers? What did they shoot? What happened? Go to practice score, go to their website, check that. And so we kind of stepped into it, and it really blew up, and it was really good. Rimfire is unique in the sense that it'll never be national like our Centerfire 2-day pro series, right? Most rimfire is not regional. It is very local. Like, think a pistol match, right? How many pistol ranges that I have close to me that I can go shoot? Not a lot of guys are dedicated to, I'm going to go drive 6 hours for a match. Most PRS 2-day matches are 6 hours is a chip shot, right? And so we were very keen on that from the get-go. So it has grown. It has done well. Of course, now we have some people that have, we kind of screwed up some rules and allow some, just try to play nice. So there's a little bit of division in there, just like the NRL and the PRS and the Centerfire. That's going to take some time to shake out. That'll be bad for the sport. And so it's an awesome venue. Is it as big? No. I mean, most matches on average are 20 to 30 folks. It's sustainability is hard for some venues. Like my venue's an example. We are too big to charge 25, 30, 40 bucks for a rimfire match and make it worth it. Right. It just doesn't make fun. It just doesn't make sense. It's like driving a car to work 100 miles a day that gets 5 miles a gallon. You might want to go get a Geo Metro, then it would make sense, right? Or electric car or something. So some of our Centerfire guys with the bigger facilities that doesn't make sense for them. But the beauty of it is a guy can have a couple acres of land, a couple 100 yards safely, and he can run an awesome match. And that is the beauty of it. That's a growth. And he can put it together, and only having 15 guys to have it qualified as a match, it's awesome. So, last year we were, 300, 350 matches. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm taking a very cautious approach. Some guys didn't like it, especially out east. So they're all divided now. It's just, they don't understand. They don't see with the NRL PRS, that history. So they're like, oh, we're going to start our own thing. Okay, we'll go ahead. And so that's going to hurt the sport in the long run. But it has a mainstay. The only problem is with its sustainability. is it's you can get in a steel, you can get in the infrastructure pretty cheap. Um, it's good for the shooters because they can get into that 25, 40-ish, 45-ish price point. Um, but I think we'll go through a lot of match directors because there's just not, it's hard to sustain. And if shooters don't support it, the market's just going to decide of what makes sense. Um, so, the shooters need to be super cautious of that. Like, hey, well, gosh, man, he's charging me $30. Another guy's charging me 35. Okay, maybe he gets 15 to the range he has to pay, right? And so that part's hard. But we're free market folks. We'll let it decide. I think we've seen more turnover in the Rimfire series, more matches popping up, going away, and then more matches popping up where they have a little bit more longevity in the centerfire because there's a little bit more investment. So I don't know what that means for the future, but the arrow is definitely up. I would be curious as a PRS director to see once centerfire ammunition becomes more readily available, because we've seen our 2 inches, the arrow is definitely up, but the one, because guys are really saving their centerfire ammo for the bigger events. If centerfire ammunition becomes more available and components becomes more available, I'm curious to see what that does to the rimfire and the crossballization.
I think with the direction that everything's gone, I just see a complete escalation in rimfire. Number one, because it's a worldwide thing. It's not, a lot of companies in Europe can't shoot center fire and do things, but they can shoot air gun and they can shoot rimfire. And rimfire, in my opinion, is also one of the best gateways for youth and women, because it is just one of those things that anybody can go out, buy a simple rifle, put an optic on it, and compete depending on what, who you're competing with and the group that you're competing with and who the class, I guess you could say. But
yes and no. So it's kind of like, my thoughts on the 100 series. Hey, why don't you guys do a 100 series? Well, I'm pretty sure that the PRS did, to a degree, at least a division.
We keep having issues with your
yeah, that's
internet.
great. We can look at, there's hunters. Yeah, you got me.
Yeah, it keeps going out, and then it'll come back, and then it'll go out, and then it'll come back, and it looks like it's on your end. There's some people saying something about it, so I don't know what's going on, but yeah, we'll try.
Yeah, I don't know. I got full, but okay. So it is to read like, hey, hunters, there's X millions of hunters that are out there. Well, how many of those hunters actually want to compete? And if they want to compete, they're going to want to probably compete at a competitive level. So rimfire is kind of the same way. There's a bunch of rimfire shooters out there, and there's guys that find that niche that I don't think is as much as a cross pollination from what we've seen in the rimfire shooters are rimfire shooters, opposed to hey, I'm gonna do a little bit of everything. So the jury's still out on it. It's super healthy. Within our first year, we had as many fire matches as we fire one-day matches, but at the same time, our one-day matches our center fire matches were much more attended than the rimfire matches. However, because those rimfire matches are much more attainable cost-wise, facility-wise, it's a really good niche in the PRS as far as allowing as many shooters at whatever price point as possible, families, kids, wives, to compete. And so it was a natural fit.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm tracking there. So you did make some PRS rule updates. What were the rule updates? I know there's always somebody that has issues with a rule or different things. I dealt with that in the NRL, but for your side of things on the PRS side, what have been the updates and kind of what led to that, I guess?
We haven't had too many significant rule updates opposed to clarifications. We just put one out this week. It was a clarification. I'm a big believer in, if we get the PRS rule book to 100 pages, we're dead, right? I'm just a believer in that, right? It needs to be simple. We want to maintain our outlaw nature, but the members demand a certain amount of structure from us. So we just made a clarification on our AG Cup, which really only affects the top 50 guys that choose to shoot, and making sure, like, hey guys, you actually have to be a member to get points. Hey, you actually have to pay your buy-in. There really hasn't been too many significant rule changes to clarifications. And honestly, I don't vote on that. Something comes up and someone asks me or requests from me something, I'm like, not a problem. Let me go take it to your 40 peers across the country and let them vote on it. And because I don't even vote on it, I just put it up for discussion. Um, and typically it's a vast majority. The biggest one that we've had lately was the kind of the mulligans, and that coinciding with the NRL kind of folding up and the East Coast kind of central West Coast type thing, kind of got some people a little emotional, because it's very uncommon. Say on the east of the Mississippi, especially, that is very uncommon in our culture. And I think all the different cultures that we have are very important. I go out west, I shoot Hornady, I shoot, Idaho. I go central and I'm looking at windmills, wind generating turbines. I'm like, well, that's a shitty place to run a match, you know. And then I see a lighter, much smaller targets, much more time compressed. I think all these cultures are phenomenal. And some people don't like it. They want to standardize it. Okay, fine. But that really wasn't the foundation of our sport. Our foundation of the sport is everywhere you go, there's going to be a subculture with a standard set of broad rules, for competitive fairness. I definitely don't want to do that. That's why I've been very adamant to fight certain target standardization. I'm like, you guys lost your mind. You guys don't like something, don't shoot that match. Go to someone else's match. Talk to the match director. And it's usually, most of those requests we get are filled with emotion and not well thought out. Hey, here's the issue. Here's a discussion about the issue and what I understand. And here's a recommendation. Most of it is like, hey, that match director's fucked up. The PRS is fucked up and I want it fixed. And they're not looking at the broad picture. And so there's probably not a whole lot we could do for those people. But if someone comes with a very good issue discussion recommendation, I take that. I'm like, hey man, send me an email. I take that immediately to the committee and let the committee vote on it. And it might not be on their timeline. Some of it we might table to the end of the year. But if it's a hole that I assess or another match director on the committee assesses, we fix it in real time. But I think people underestimate the stability, of the structure. And so it's worked really, really well. Have we lost a couple of shooters because they've lost their mind? Yeah, that's going to happen. A lot of people think, oh, the PRS is banning people. Since I've been in charge, I believe that we've asked or refunded membership dues, maybe 4 to 5 people. And if you think about that, it's pretty remarkable. It's pretty small, right? Pretty small. So we've had a conversation with a few. They were level-headed, maybe agree to disagree, but they understood both sides. Okay, cool, no big deal. But guys that go score surf, that's becoming less and less. And it's because I think people are starting to realize, like, hey man, if you're a regional director who's a match director and all the match directors in your region don't want you there, that is the PRS. That is not Shannon Kay. They're just running by me for professional courtesy. And so it kind of quashes it pretty quick. So some of this stuff is actually quite humorous because most decisions are local and regional and really come up to us because we will always push it back down to the local level.
Well, and with everything, people are passionate. They're really in depth into, hey, I spent a lot of money on X, Y, and Z, to come here to do my thing, and I deserve to be treated, at the top of the thing. And to a point, yes, you do. But the problem is it's just like anything in politics. The shooting sports with this has become political, whether we like to say it or not. Like you have to try and make everybody happy, and it's impossible to. It isn't going to work. And no matter what you do, you're going to piss people off and they're going to go away. It's just how it is. But people get super offended really easy, and it's hard, as as an ex-match director to not offend people. You might say the wrong thing and you didn't mean it, but it is what it is. And that's the hardest part, just not, letting it take any skin off your back in the meantime.
Yeah, Cole, but that's the thing is that's what the Chiefs get is these match directors that are doing it for fun or for the enjoyment or maybe for a little bit of money, but definitely not the market rate. They kind of get that pushback and they're like, fuck this, I'm done. I see it quite often, like, hey, and usually there's another guy, hopefully, that'll kind of take it up, and then he gets burnt out in 3 years. And I look at it from the PRS standpoint, my guys, we are running a unsustainable operation. If I look at the match directors that run a 2-day match from 2012, when the series and these organizations kind of got started, right? There's like 3 or 4 of us. That's a problem. So what is it? Is it because they're getting rich? No, because if they're getting rich, they would have done whatever. Because there's too much work and there is too much risk. They don't want to deal with it, and of course, there's families and there's a lot of different issues in it. But to me, I constantly focus on our match directors. Hey, whatever you do, make it sustainable. Whatever decision, we're not going to dictate it. Make it sustainable. And it's hard on some. It is super hard on some. We had an awesome venue in Montana. Well, if you get 60, 70 shooters, man, like, yeah, sure. The market's changing. There's not a lot of destination, good scenery matches. Guys will tend to want to shoot closer to home because they're shooting so many matches. Understandable. But there's no reason the way that match is executed and the work that was done that it shouldn't be sustainable. But it wasn't sustainable for the match director because of the numbers. Well, sure, it was super rural. There's it's a long way, not a lot of lodging and hotels. Okay, we get that. And that's the market. We'll adjust with the market. I think the shooters don't understand that as much. You're right. They're a little entitled. But at the same time, let the market decide. Guys will go. That's where we're going as well. We'll support new guys and we'll support them. But we want to get at the 2-day level. We want to get those matches up to what's your capacity? I did 150. And it's working very well. So it's a sustainable match. And when it's a sustainable match, the match director gets better because just like I know, we make a mistake, multiple mistakes every single match, right? And we learn from them. And those match directors get better and better. And they balance new shooters, the top shooters in their course of fire and their design. And so we have that kind of talent, at least at the pro series level, or really execute a top level competition. And it's really what separated us from the NRL. The pro shooters wanted that competition, and it worked. So, the 1-day level, it's a little modified from that, but they need to be sustainable too. The rimfire guys need to be sustainable too. We see more turnover on the rimfire matches than we do anything else. Lot more turnover than we do in the center fire. So we're kind of focused on that as well. As far as the good thing is the cost and the investment is a lot lesser price what the center fire match directors do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a juggling contest, and I don't envy you guys for juggling all the shit you've got to deal with. That's for sure. So the Pro Series and Rimfire finale locations, where are that you guys planning on having this year?
So this year, to be fair to the entire country, as we really focus out west, we're going to do it in the central region again. Some of that is a decision off of, hey, at the end of the day, the finales need to be executed at an incredibly high level. As a as an organization, the PRS, I really throttled down my shooting. I retired from the army to go shoot at a high level, right? Won a bunch of matches, but like, so I keep sacrificing that in the sense of like, oh my gosh, I'm the PRS director. This happened at this match. I will be heavily involved in the finales. I really want to get away from that and basically contract that out to our top match directors. So look at the Rimfire. Texas Precision obviously has a phenomenal reputation. Did a phenomenal job last year, and I basically made a decision. I was like, okay, hey man, you guys are going to do it next year. Let's let this series mature. It's fair. Yep, the East Coast guys, some of the West Coast guys, more so East Coast guys, were like, oh, that's crap. We need to have it in the East Coast. Okay, well, you know what? What's more important to the top 100, 150 shooters that are going to attend? A very fair, a very balanced match. It's in the center of their country. So every decision is based on, fairness, um, how well it's going to be executed. We just don't have the resource. The Rimfire, there's that is barely supports itself, right? Barely supports itself. It's not a money making entity, and so we need and with everything going up, that Rimfire director actually lost a little bit because of the requirements that we had for that finale. So it's unsustainable. So that's what I look at. Like, hey, what's sustainable? So it'll be Central Region next year for the Rimfire 2023. It'll be probably somewhere in the East Coast, somewhere that's undivided when they're not splitting different organizations because we have some matches that are running PRS matches because we allowed it. Probably, good intentions, poor judgment. So we'll do that somewhere in the East Coast, and we'll solicit that probably this summer for someone who wants to do it. The requirements would be able to hold 100, 150, basically 20 stages at a time, potentially 10. We'll see what the numbers are. This year, the finale will be at K&M. We solicit that to the East Coast. And basically, our solicitation is pretty easy. Hey, can you hold 20 stages at a time, gain RO support for that, and have a banquet type facility for 350 because the numbers are, especially once COVID's over, we're going to have a lot more international guys coming. And no one could do that. So I was like, fine, I'll do it. I'll do it at my place. Next year, we'll be going 2023, we'll go to Central Region. But we're also considering not a promise. I need to get with maybe sliding R to able to get something in September. And that will open up the Pennsylvanias, the Kansas, different parts of the country that will give us a little bit more opportunity because those matches are so big. And the reality of it is there's not many facilities or match directors that have the experience and capacity to run a 200 plus match. If you look at it right now, there's K&M, there's Texas, there's Hornady. There's not very many matches out there. So if we move it to the summer or early fall, that might open up different venues for us. I think that's important for the sport. It's important for the sustainability as well.
Right. And I mean, you've got to hit pretty much, it's going to be hot no matter what you do and where you go. But before hunting season, of course, and everybody starts, putting towards that. And that's, I think, the hard thing about doing a series in the fall is just trying to get people engaged in there, because at that point, their wives or their significant others and their family have already had enough of them being gone to where they don't want to send them away again either. I hear that a lot. Like, well, I've been gone a lot hunting, so I can't go do a finale now, or blah blah blah, whatever it is. So definitely changing that up might.
Yeah, that it might, Cole. The challenge for me is we are jamming, and our calendar, close to calendar base season works very well. Yes, some of the fall matches, shooters get their points. They shoot a couple matches and they're really not improving, so they have a little bit of burnout. Some of the fall matches, attendance suffers a little bit, and so really hesitant to change something that works well. Look, man, if you got that awesome elk hunt in September and October, whatever it might be, man, go on your hunt. Maybe shooting is a second priority. There might be not a whole lot we can do for you. But the reality is there's a lot of, every time we pull our shooters and our members, it's like 50-50, what they want to do. So it's a hard thing. So we're looking at it. If there's going to be a change, I think you'll see that in 2023 after the finale this year. It is a very hard, it's like moving a battleship. It is not a quick speedboat. It's not a jet ski. It takes a lot of time to turn that boat around. It affects our structure, which has costs and labor tied to it. So there's a lot of variables, but I do think what's best for the sport is to have more venues to be able to host these finales, opposed to me driving out to New Mexico, maybe Oklahoma, Texas, or K&M. Okay, so I have 3 to 4 to 5 venues in our pocket right now. Given the weather, we could do the finale. I'd love to have a dozen. I think that would be good for the sport at the end of the day. So we're focused on that. It's a big topic for us internally this year. Absolutely.
Where are you guys going to do the AG finale at Arena again, or are you guys going to move?
No, there? This year Tom wanted me to do it. We're looking at the AG Cup. It's obviously very aspirational. Drives a ton of attention. We struggle with some sustainability issues. Tom and I, every time we talk, I'll see him in a couple of weeks. We're going fishing together. It's hard to run a match to that level. So it's aspirational. If it breaks even, we're good. I'm very conscious of PRS, making sure that we're not subsidizing, the top guys with the base of the PRS. Right now, we Tom and I are really getting our heads wrapped around making the match itself sustainable. And so, we're looking at it. A lot of the AG Cup shooters, which obviously they have a huge say. I think, Francis is a good example. I think a lot of people, not all, but a lot of people share sentiments like, hey, rotate the PRS finale, but do, the AG Cup at one venue. The problem is for me as a PRS director and K&M owner, that doesn't make sense for me, right? I don't necessarily want to do it every year. It takes a week to shut down our facility and a lot of prep. 50 guys, that's unsustainable. So look at it. We both obviously want to keep it going. It's great for the shooters, phenomenal for the sponsors. It's very aspirational. A ton of people watch it. But ultimately, I'm going to leave that up to Tom. I'm going to leave it up to the shooters. What do they want? Where does that fit in? That is really codified the highest of the highest level. And it is, people pay attention. They know. If you're shooting AG, they know. And it gives everyone a goal to work for that's doing well in the pro series. I got a guy that attended our training 3 years ago. He's a member of our place. Didn't pick up a rifle. Bass fisherman, retired, has a lot of natural talent. Shot. He's winning matches now. And man, that's his goal. And now he's doing AG. He's only been in the sport 2 or 3 years. It's just phenomenal. You got Allison Zane, a 16, 17-year-old girl going to prom, parents coming to every match. and she's running with that is what our sport's all about. Welcoming new shooters, highlighting excellence and growing the sport. And if people want to dedicate their every inch of their free time, awesome. People want to do it part time, awesome. Everyone has a home. New shooters, the best shooters, and that's why it's great because you could go shoot with a Francis Cologne or a Cole Higginbottom, at any match, a 1 day match or a 2 day match, and then those guys you'll see them on TV, shooting the AG Cup. So we're definitely not going to lose our roots at all.
I still think that you should have one East Coast 1 year and one West Coast 1 year. I think it'd definitely change some shit up, because out here I've shot in both, and it definitely is a change for a lot of people. And does it give somebody more home court advantage? Maybe, somebody that's used to shooting some of those ranges. And I think that's, in my opinion, that would really change that up a lot. And I'd like to see it, but
yeah, I'm with you. And I think a lot of guys on the West Coast, and it might be some of the scar tissue and what I call well poisoning out west from a divide between the NRL and the PRS. If you look at our structure and our points, and hey, you got to have 3 matches, but the finale's, 2 matches, we have that covered pretty well. And so some of that is like, hey, what's the math say? Oh, we want to do this scoring. Okay, well, you know what? And that's why we didn't respond to it. We responded to stuff. It's just not well thought out. We did that. It was a disaster. It benefited the top 10% and it hammered the bottom 40%. Not good for the sport. Just do the math. Like, hey, go make a video. Do a video, fine. But I'm looking at the math. Like, look at the math. If you finish first and you get 100 points, and I finish second, you beat me by 10%. Okay, well, I'm second place. Okay, so now I have a 95. Well, what does that do to the bottom guys? You're going to tell a bottom guys that he finished 50% in points to us, but maybe 100th place in some of these big matches we have. And now instead of having 50 points, he has 30. And that's going to be good for growth and encourage, that's fair scoring. It's not. So people are compartmentalizing some of the data. They need to plug it. We tried it. It didn't work. I'm not saying our scoring system is perfect, but it's kind of like our government. It's not perfect, but it's the best that's out there. And so we'll roll with it. But so we'll look at that. That's why we weigh the finales. That's why we weigh the AG Cup. And I'm all about recommending to Tom because I'm going to yield to him. The AG Cup is his baby, and he was the brain behind it, and he took the risk, and he deserved every respect and professional courtesy. If there's a facility out west that wants to do it, man, send Tom a note, call him up, because the AG Cup, K&M essentially gave that to him for free. Which comes at a cost, right? Because we're not doing any other events. So if there's and in some places, new facilities, new match directors, like, hey, man, I'll do it for free. I think this will benefit us in getting some attention and benefit in future matches. Like, I'd be very happy to recommend that to Tom. But when you're talking the top 50 guys in the nation, I love them because every single one of them are friends. But those guys are they're prima donnas. I mean, they expect a high level of perfection and well thought out coursifiers. And I think that's why most of them are pretty satisfied because what we did for them this year was very fair, regardless if they're West Coast, East Coast guys. That's why the series is so important, guys. Get your points, because that will dictate, because that is going to be whatever percentage it is going into it. And then you guys all battle it out. So our sport, I think we need to accept that is very much like golf, is you could be the top ranked golfer in the world, top 10 golfer in the world, and you're going to do well. But you're not going to win every single tournament. Shooting is the same way. And that's why I think the series has so much draw for people. And I tell East Coast shooters all the time, like from local guy to us, Cole, you have got to get out west. Go to Colorado. go to all these matches out west because it's much different. Central, Central, you're still going to get the same, if not more wind than west, but in the southeast and the east coast, maybe the Atlantic up northeast, it's very different. When you're talking a span of 100 degrees, 180 degrees course fire, an elevation up and down, finding targetry, those skill set, and then the high winds and the different winds, that is a skill set that a lot of East Coast shooters struggle with. And at the same time, the West Coast shooters will really struggle coming out to a place like K&M potentially, and their targets are so small, the time is so fast. Those cultures we really need to celebrate, opposed to and make our top shooters, the top guys, really, you need to travel. You need to get these different experiences to be a well-rounded national level shooter. If we're not doing national, but I do agree with your point, Cole. Like I do think the finale, East, West, Central, I think that model, that policy is pretty sound. I just like to expand it a little bit more so we get different facilities. I'd love to have a finale in Oregon, or Washington, in Idaho, Utah, but that means we got to move it back. It comes with a lot of risk to what our shooters expect. So we're looking at it. That's probably our number one on our, okay, what are our initiatives? So we just need to kind of consolidate and gain some trust from those West Coast shooters because of that NRL PRS divide. And I think in a year or two, that'll definitely facilitate itself. And I'm all ears to guys that want to help facilitate that.
Good. Hopefully somebody's listening and they can put in some time and some feedback that, that's the thing. If you are somebody that sits on your chair behind your keyboard and you say you really want to benefit the growth of the sport, do something about it, right? It's just about like politics or anything else. Everybody bitches about politics, but nobody will get into it. So you can do one of two things. You can either sit back and relax and bitch about it, or you can be the person that changes it, in my opinion, right? 22.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Colorado. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm tracking Colorado. You're talking 22 Lima. Like, hey, that's an awesome venue. Hey,
Yep,
man.
Yep.
And I actually talked to the match directors. Hey, if we move it back, would you guys be interested in hosting a finale there? Yes. Okay. Awesome. That goes into my repertoire. Like, okay, we're facilitating this. And I just had a conversation about that with the match directors that run it. So it's a work in progress. Things take a little bit of time. The most important thing is that we run a well executed fair finale. That always hasn't happened. So that will come first, but all these other points we need to happen. The West needs to also kind of embrace it a little bit. That's going to take some time. There's a lot of scar tissue there. We can't fix it. The PRS was the devil for a long time, right? Well, it's really not, because people, once they really look down and get past the distractors, it's like, hey, who is the West? Well, it's Jay. It's all these other guys that are regional and the match directors out there. Like, don't call me. But that's the beauty about it. If guys have ideas, like there's some guys that were upset at Cameo, there's a little flare up. Guys, call me, because you know what? Even as a director, which is probably not a good model, right? Because if I get a shitty hamburger at McDonald's, I don't get to talk to the CEO. But in the PRS, if there's a problem, man, you send me an email, you're most likely getting a phone call. You're definitely getting an email back. But that email is probably saying, hey, this is Shannon. Hey, when you have time, give me a call. I want the ground truth information. We're big, but you know what? I'm still small enough to manage to be like, hey, man, tell me the truth. I talk to the match director, I talk to shooters. I bring it all in, and we get it right. We get it right. Maybe not initially, but we'll definitely make the changes to get it right. So as that happens and has continued to happen across the country, People have a lot of faith in the PRS and the leadership, and they also understand the structure. Like, hey, man, did you talk to the match director? Okay, you guys are gonna have to agree to disagree. All right, let me talk to let's all grow together here. Um, and it's worth it for those people that don't or have a vested interest in, for whatever reason, personal, financial, whatever, trying to hurt the PRS. It's really just white noise to me, and we don't even respond anymore. The more we respond to kind of emotion, the more we empower those that have no vested interest in what we're doing. In the meantime, we make it about the match directors, the shooters, and the sponsors, and obviously, 90% of shooters, they see through every single thing. It's always those 10%. I'm not trying to 10 what I'm going to do, and we'll keep growing.
Right. And it's just like the military. People have never really experienced that, but you always run it up the chain of command. Once you run it up the chain of command and it still doesn't get fixed, then you stand on your soapbox, you beat everybody up. But you give it that chance to try and work itself out, because there is a chain of command for a reason. Like, if there's an issue with me, I would expect you to go to, the board or whoever else. And then if they don't do it, then by means, I mean, you have the right, if you don't feel like it got assessed then, to go freaking bitch and complain about it. But
Yeah.
I always tell people, I'm like, look, okay, so you had an issue. What were the next steps?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, Cole, is like, hey, I can't kick this guy out. Yeah, like, hey, it's a good example. Like, hey, in the Northwest, hey, this guy's being kind of being a jackass. Okay, guys, I have nothing to do with it. I can't, and the PRS does not control if your 3 regional match directors don't want you there. And there's nothing I could do for you. They've given me the professional courtesy to be like, hey, Shannon, just to let you know, this is what we want to do. Okay, guys, I don't control your matches if you don't want that shooter there, because one will shoot with him. Sponsors are turned off by him. Do what you have to do. But hey, guys, make sure you follow the rules. We give them a warning, and always it's always better to try to get people on board opposed to kicking them out. And they do it. And unfortunately, 4 or 5 shooters the past 3 years have gone down that road. Okay, guys, nothing I can do for you. Hey, and it might be the PRS, but you know who the PRS guys? It's the shooters, the match directors, and not really Shannon Kay or the board, right? The board has never really voted to ban somebody. And if there's a hard decision, I take it to the regional directors. I take it to the board. And I do nothing, absolutely nothing, without local advice, local voting, the match directors. So, unfortunately, the good news is that whole kind of drama thing that was really prevalent the past 3 or 4 years is really starting to taper off, and that helps growth. And really, social media, that whole psychological, whatever it is to it, podcast, this and that, whatever, really doesn't have an effect on the ground truth. And so it's really kind of humorous and mildly interesting to us as far as we dictate, the direction of where the sport's going.
I kind of want to finish out with this statement, and I want you to think about it, because I've been on both sides of the aisle, where I've been bitching about a match director because I didn't feel like, something was done right or something. And I know people have done the same thing about me. You've got to understand that as a match director, it's like you're calling my baby ugly, right? You've put in a lot of time, you put in a lot of effort to try and do this. And when people are constantly bitching about it, you get defensive and you get emotional, right? Emotions take over. And then all the emotions happen. Now, there's a way to do everything, right? There's a way to walk up to somebody and say you have a problem. But I think the worst part as we as shooters have is letting our emotions take over and bitching about a match or a stage or something like that, instead of eating it, sucking it up, and then going to the match director that night, that evening, and say, hey, this is what I had a problem with, and doing something about it. But you've got to think, if you were put in that position and you're a match director and you come in and you've poured your heart and soul into it, you've worked your ass off on the prize table hours and hours and hours, and I could admit, Shannon can attest to it, hours of freaking work to put into a match, and people start bitching and people start complaining because you don't see everything. And that's one of the hardest parts about being a match director, is you're never going to see every little thing that's going to happen. Oh shit, I didn't think they were going to shoot it that way, or I didn't think that was going to happen when we proofed it, So as a shooter, we also, I think, in my mind, need to do our part to, number one, be appreciative, and number two, address it the correct way. Go to the match director, pull them aside, go to the RO. If you have the RO, pull them aside, and do it the right way. And that is one thing, because I've had so many ROs ruined by shooters just belittling them, degrading them, telling them they did full of shit and they didn't see anything. And it's because they got emotional and they didn't go through the steps, and they didn't pull the RO aside and say, look, this is what I feel, and then go to the match director. Instead, they went to their squad, blew it up, and then, of course, the bad apple just ruins the entire squad. The squad then ruins the match. The emotions come out and everything else. So I just want you all to kind of think about that next time you go to a match and you see that. Kind of take a step back and understand the thought process and everything that's gone into that match.
Yeah, Cole, I mean, you're right on. If I look at exactly what you just said, people look to the PRS. Guys, if you want a PRS representative controlling this, like PGA Tour officials, do you know what that structure, how big, and what the cost would be? You guys wouldn't want to be a PRS member, right? We're not there. Don't know if we're going to get there anytime soon. Probably unlikely. Go to the match director. We have all these volunteers. Yes, we have phenomenal RO option 1, RO option 2. We made major strides and change to make it more sustainable. But at the end of the day, most of these ROs, regardless of what option you're doing, are not going to be experienced as a shooter. So if something's wrong, you're always going to get further with honey opposed to vinegar. And if the RO is just maybe punching above his weight class, which is common, right? Of course, you don't want to get to the point where you're paying for ROs to good talent, because most people, you couldn't pay them enough not to shoot, opposed to RO, right? It's a sustainability issue again, right? Just be like, hey, RO, I'd really like you to call a match director on this one. That happened in Colorado. Hey, match director told the ROs, hey, guys, no reshoots whatsoever unless I have permission. RO had really good intentions, just poor judgment, made a mistake. The match director it's happened to you. It's happened to me. It happens. There is nothing the match director could do. He can't be everywhere. But you know what? As far as shooters, the best people that know the rule the best are the match directors and the shooters. Shooters, stop. Hey, I think you should get a match director here. Something's incorrect. Get on the radio and call them up, and do it respectfully, do it calmly with no emotion, and the match director will fix it to the best of his ability within the rules. Mm-hmm. We need to put more onus on the shooters. Every other action shooting sport, you go to pistol, whatever. Hey man, you're an RO. You're pacing targets. You're a lot more heavily involved. If we want to be sustainable, there's no way we could facilitate volunteer ROs like we could 5 years ago compared to how many matches we have this year. So yeah, there's a cultural change there. Everyone has their responsibility. The shooters, the RO, and the match director. If we don't communicate it and we just sit aside and me and you sit back in a squad and be like, well, this is kind of fucked up. We don't do anything respectfully without hurting people's feelings or challenging them or making it toxic. then yeah, we're going to continue to struggle there. We all have a role to play. Most shooters get that, but also most shooters don't want conflict. And so we just need to find that balance. And that's our next big kind of, growth area right there, because it is getting more competitive. It is getting more emotional. Those are good things. We just need to be good sportsmen. And that's the key. That's why we celebrate our sportsman of the year. And because we want to promote that. Hey man, we're not always going to get it right. This is an action shooting sport. Hey, we really appreciate going to a different match within the rules and having different cultures, West Coast, Central, East Coast, Northeast, Great Lakes, whatever it might be. We want that. We all want that. But when we get upset and we let emotion rule the day, you're going to try to steer the sport's rules to conformity. And then, we got some still challenge. And that is not what we want in the sport. We want that, keep that outlawed nature in the different cultures. Go to your match, go to Hornady, come to K&M, go to Texas, go to Utah, all these different matches. We want that. That's what makes the sport so desirable. But the shooters got a role to play in that too, especially the top guys that know better.
Right. Yeah, I had that problem a couple of years ago to where one of the ROs kind of got ran over, and he started to run the stage like it wasn't written. And the big shooters, some of the big shooters, I don't even know who it was, started pushing them like, oh, I see what they're doing, but I'm going to push him a little bit more. And I'm going to push him a little bit more because, and then after so many stages, they started shooting the stage different than the people that shot it in front of them. And then it came back bad on me. And that, like you said, I can't be everywhere at once. And that was an issue. I mean, you've got people giving up their time to RO, right? And you can't really hold it against them. And who I hold it against was it the shooters, trying to game or trying to take a stage to something they knew it wasn't supposed to be, but they tried to change it to help themselves out. And that was one of those turning points to where I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I want to keep doing this because this has lost the fun. It has lost the camaraderie to me and stuff like that. And I mean, we can have a whole nother podcast about it, but yeah, I agree 100%. As shooters, we should take 100%, into ourselves to say, hey, I screwed up. I wasn't supposed to do that. And there's still some great shooters out there. Most shooters are still great people, but they're like everything. There's still some people that try to push the envelope.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
But hey, we're like almost 2 hours into it. We covered a lot of shit, and I truly appreciate it. Hopefully a lot of people got their questions answered. I know Shannon's kind of always an open book. If you ask him, he'll tell you. He's kind of like me. We rub people wrong because if you want to know, we'll tell you, but you might not like the answer to it.
Right.
That's the whole point. So if you have issues, reach out to Shannon, reach out to Julie. They've always been phenomenal at returning my texts, my emails. I suck at returning Julie's emails. I know she's going to yell at me, but I appreciate it, man. Thank you for coming on. We covered a lot of stuff and hopefully answered. I want to hit real quick, Timney. I'm going to give away a trigger or two. If you go review the podcast on whatever podcast site you're listening to it on, whether it be Podbean, any of them, take a screenshot of it and PM me. I'm going to put you in a group I'm going to start giving away some triggers every month. So check that out. Thanks, Timney, for sending these. Thanks, Falcor, for sponsoring us. We appreciate them as always. Long Range Tactics, of course, which is mine. We're always out there trying to educate and get people the right way. K&M. If you want to go learn, I get asked all the time, where the hell do I go teach or where do I go learn? K&M's a phenomenal place. I hear nothing but good about it. Just stay off his freaking grass. And
we're getting less and less. We've hardened the facility. I need to tell everybody, hey, if you're coming to K&M in a month, you might want to bring knee pads, a lot of concrete and rocks now, because we're just, I got a bunch of guys from Switzerland this week. We are wide open, and it's, we really harden the place to make it weather resistant as possible. But thanks, Cole. Yeah.
I have to come out there and train one of these days. Anyway, thanks everybody. Appreciate you watching. And always, if you have something, comment, PM us. I usually always try to message people back. So thanks everybody, and thanks Shannon. Appreciate you.
Yeah, man.
Don't be afraid to pipe up. Send us your questions or topics and we'll cover them on the show. Thanks for listening.